In the dead of night, in the deepest trenches of the world's oceans, a silent war was fought. It was a war of shadows, waged by steel behemoths hunting each other in total blackness. This was the Cold War. But this story is not about the war everyone knew. It's about the mission nobody was supposed to find out about. It begins with a catastrophe. A Soviet nuclear submarine, the K-129, vanishes without a trace in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. The Soviet fleet, in a desperate, frantic search, turns up nothing. They declare it lost forever. But someone was listening. Thousands of miles away, the U.S. Navy's secret SOSUS network, a web of underwater microphones laid across the ocean floor, had recorded a sound. A catastrophic violence event. A sudden, terrifying implosion. Using this acoustic breadcrumb, a specialized U.S. submarine, the USS Halibut, is sent on a clandestine mission. After weeks of sweeping the abyssal plain, 3 miles down, its cameras capture an image that chills the blood. The mangled wreckage of the K-129. The Soviets had lost a queen from their chessboard, but the Americans had just found it. And in the halls of the CIA, a question was asked. Not what happened to it, but could we take it? This is the story of Project Azorian, the most audacious, technologically impossible, and secretive heist in history. An $800 million gamble, $3.8 billion in today's money, to steal a 2,000-ton Soviet submarine from 3 miles beneath the surface, all while the entire Soviet Navy watched. And they decided to hide it all in plain sight. March 1968. The world is a powder keg. The Vietnam War is raging. Tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union are at an all-time high. The doctrine of mutually assured destruction isn't a theory. It's a daily reality held in check by submarines just like the K-129. The K-129 was a Gulf II class ballistic missile submarine, a 320-foot-long diesel-electric hunter. It was part of the Soviet Pacific Fleet's permanent underwater deterrent. On February 24, 1968, it slipped out of its pen in Kamchatka and sailed into the North Pacific for a routine combat patrol. On board were 98 men and, most importantly, 3 R-21 nuclear missiles, each one aimed at a target on the American West Coast. For the first few weeks, the mission was standard. The K-129 checked in via radio on schedule. Then, in the second week of March, the check-in stopped. Silence. At the Soviet naval headquarters in Vladivostok, silence from a missile sub is the loudest possible alarm. The Pacific Fleet scrambled. Dozens of ships, aircraft, and other submarines were diverted in a massive, desperate search operation. They saturated the sub's expected patrol route, a vast expanse of ocean hundreds of miles northwest of Hawaii. For 2 months, the Soviet Navy searched. They scanned, they listened, they pinged. They found nothing. No oil slick, no debris field, no radiation. It was as if the 2,000-ton vessel and its 98 crewmen had been erased from the planet. The Soviets were forced to do the unthinkable, officially list the K-129 as lost at sea, presumed sunk. But they were looking in the wrong place. The Americans weren't looking. They were listening. Deep within classified U.S. naval facilities, analysts were monitoring SOSUS, the sound surveillance system. This was America's secret weapon in the undersea war, a vast hidden network of hydrophones laid on the ocean floor designed to track the precise movements of Soviet subs. On March 11, 1968, a SOSUS array near Hawaii registered a significant acoustic event. It wasn't an earthquake. It wasn't a standard explosion. It was a sharp, sudden, catastrophic spike followed by the terrifying cascade of noise consistent with a submarine hull collapsing under immense pressure, an implosion. Naval intelligence triangulated the sound. The location was not on the K-129's patrol route. It was hundreds of miles away. the Soviets weren't just searching in the wrong area, they were in the wrong part of the ocean. Why was the K-129 so far off course? Had it malfunctioned? Was there a mutiny? The why didn't matter as much as the what. The US knew something the Soviets didn't, the exact location of their most coveted piece of technology. But knowing where it was and seeing it were two different things. The estimated depth was over 16,000 feet, 3 miles down. The pressure there is over 7,000 pounds per square inch. No human could survive it. No conventional submarine could reach it. Except one. The call went out to the USS Halibut. The Halibut was a unique creature, a former nuclear missile submarine that had been gutted and refitted for one purpose: deep-sea espionage. It was equipped with a revolutionary piece of gear known as the Fish, a 12-foot-long, 2-ton towed submersible packed with side-scan sonar, floodlights, and high-resolution cameras. Under the cover of searching for a lost American weather instrument, the Halibut sailed to the coordinates provided by SOSUS. For weeks, it meticulously mowed the lawn, dragging the Fish just above the abyssal mud, scanning mile after mile of empty darkness. On August 20th, 1968, after almost 3 weeks of searching, a shape materialized on the sonar screens. The crew watched in stunned silence as the cameras passed over it. It was her, the K-129. The submarine was broken, its hull breached, its sail bent at a grotesque angle, but it was largely intact. It was resting on a desolate plain of volcanic sediment, a tomb of steel 3 miles deep. The Halibut spent the next several weeks taking over 22,000 photographs, creating a complete mosaic of the wreck site. When the Halibut returned to Pearl Harbor, the images were rushed to Washington. At CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia, a new division was formed in total secrecy. Their first file was codenamed Azorian. The photographs laid out in that secure room in Langley represented the single greatest intelligence prize of the Cold War. Think about what was down there: a fully armed Soviet nuclear submarine. Inside its hull were the R-21 missiles. The CIA could finally study their design, their fuel, their targeting systems. Inside the radio room were the code books, the keys to unlocking the entire Soviet naval communication network. Inside the sonar room was the Soviets' own acoustic technology. And inside the conning tower were the sub's operational orders. This wasn't just a piece of hardware. It was the Soviets' entire undersea playbook. But it might as well have been on the moon. The year was 1968. No one had ever recovered an object that large from that depth. It was considered, by all known laws of engineering, impossible. The pressure was too great, the distance too vast. It would be like trying to pick up a fragile, waterlogged cigar box from the top of the Empire State Building using a single 3-mile-long piece of spaghetti. Any attempt would be staggeringly expensive, technologically unprecedented, and unbelievably risky. The wreck was in international waters. The moment a recovery ship appeared on station, the entire Soviet fleet would come running. The mission would be over before it began. The CIA's engineers wrestled with the problem. How do you conduct a massive, industrial-scale recovery operation in the middle of the ocean for months on end without anyone knowing what you're doing? The answer they arrived at was a masterpiece of psychological warfare. It was a cover story so insane, so ambitious, and so colossally expensive that it had to be true. They would tell the world they were going mining, deep-sea mining. Today, deep-sea mining is a familiar concept. In the early 1970s, it was pure science fiction. The idea was that the ocean floor was littered with manganese nodules, potato-sized rocks rich in rare earth metals. The theory was that a company with enough vision and capital could one day dredge these nodules from the abyssal plain. The CIA's plan was to become that company. They would invent the industry as their cover story. They would build a ship, the largest, most advanced mining vessel in the world. This ship would sail to the middle of the Pacific and appear to be testing a revolutionary new system for sucking nodules off the seafloor. The Soviets would watch. Of course, they would send spy ships, they would fly reconnaissance planes, but they would see exactly what the CIA wanted them to see: a groundbreaking and probably failing civilian mining operation. But a project this big needed a face. A civilian cover story needs a civilian. But who? Who on earth was rich enough, eccentric enough, and reclusive enough to believably fund a multi-billion-dollar science fiction project and secretive enough to never talk about it? There was only one name on the list: Howard Hughes. Hughes was the perfect cover. The billionaire aviation tycoon, filmmaker, and inventor was by the 1970s the world's most famous recluse. He was hidden away on the top floor of a Las Vegas hotel, pathologically terrified of germs and known for his deep, paranoid secrecy. He also had a long history of working on classified projects for the US government, including the CIA. A CIA front company approached Hughes's organization. The deal was simple. Hughes would lend his name to the project. His company, Summit Corporation, would be the public face of this deep-sea mining venture. In return, the CIA would handle everything else. The press release went out. Howard Hughes, the visionary billionaire, was embarking on his greatest venture yet, harvesting the untold riches of the deep ocean. The Glomar Explorer would be his flagship. The world bought it. The Soviets bought it. And in a secure shipyard in Pennsylvania, shielded from satellites and spies, the CIA began to build a machine not for mining, but for a heist. The scale of this deception is almost impossible to comprehend. We are talking about a secret project hidden within another secret project, costing billions of dollars, all to fool a superpower. These are the kinds of declassified stories we live to tell. If you love uncovering these audacious, real-life spy thrillers, do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. We dive deep into these hidden histories every week, and you won't want to miss what we're raising from the depths next. All right, back to the story. The CIA had their perfect cover. Now they just had to build the most complex machine ever conceived. The ship they built was not a ship. It was a factory, a floating surgical theater, and a magic trick all rolled into one. It was named the Hughes Glomar Explorer. From the outside, it looked like a deep-sea drilling vessel, but stranger. It was 619 feet long, dominated by a massive 200-foot-tall derrick. It had thrusters on its hull that would allow it to hold its position in the ocean with pinpoint accuracy, a technology now common, but then revolutionary, known as dynamic positioning. But the Glomar's real secrets were hidden inside. The first secret was the moon pool. This was the heart of the entire operation. In the center of the ship, the hull opened up to the ocean below in a massive 200-foot-long, 75-foot-wide bay. This pool was so large it could be sealed off from above by a retractable roof. Once the ship was on station, this roof would slide closed, hiding the ship's true purpose from spy satellites. The second secret was the drill string. The derrick on deck wasn't for a drill. It was for a pipe string 3 miles long. But this wasn't a hollow pipe for sucking up nodules. It was a meticulously constructed steel tower, section by section, that would be lowered into the deep. It was the arm that would reach into the abyss. And at the end of that arm was the mission's crown jewel. It was a device so secret it was built in a separate facility on a massive submersible barge hidden from view. The engineers called it Clementine, but it was known simply as the Claw. This was no simple grappling hook. The Claw was a 1,000-ton, 8-legged mechanical spider. It was designed to be lowered, folded up through the moon pool, descend 3 miles, and then, guided by cameras and sonar, position itself perfectly over the K-129's hull. Once in place, its massive steel talons would close around the submarine's fractured body, grasping it with just enough pressure to lift it without crushing it. It was, without question, the most sophisticated and largest piece of robotics ever conceived. The entire system was a technological marvel, built from the ground up in total secrecy. The budget ballooned. What was planned as a $250 million project soon hit $500 million and then $800 million. In 2024 dollars, that is $3.8 billion. It was the most expensive single intelligence operation in history, costing more than the entire Apollo program's lunar landers. Every single component was a gamble. Would the dynamic positioning hold the ship steady enough in the violent Pacific storms? Would the 3-mile-long pipe string buckle under its own weight? Would the hydraulic claws of Clementine, operating in total darkness and crushing pressure, be able to grab a fragile 2,000-ton wreck? And would they be able to do it all while the Soviet Navy was breathing down their necks? The CIA was building a solution to a problem that had never existed, using technology that had never been tested for a mission that could not be allowed to fail. By the summer of 1974, the Hughes Glomar Explorer was complete. The submersible barge carrying the Claw was towed out to sea, where it submerged, met the Glomar, and secretly transferred its payload into the moon pool, all beneath the waves, hidden from the world. The ship and its crew of CIA operatives, disguised as roughneck drillers and mining technicians, sailed from Long Beach, California. Their destination, a desolate patch of water 1,500 miles northwest of Hawaii. Project Azorian was live. The heist was on. On July 4th, 1974, the Glomar Explorer arrived on station. The coordinates were programmed into the dynamic positioning system. The massive thrusters whirred to life, holding the 63,000-ton ship perfectly still against the deep ocean currents. The captain gave the order. The retractable roof over the moon pool slid shut, plunging the central bay into artificial light, hiding it from Soviet satellites. The first section of the 3-mile-long pipe string was guided into place, and at its end, the colossal folded form of the Claw, Clementine, slipped beneath the waves and began its long descent. The mood in the control room was one of unbearable tension. This was not a quick operation. Lowering the pipe string, section by 60-foot section, took days. Every weld, every joint was under astronomical pressure. A single faulty bolt could send the entire $3.8 billion assembly crashing to the ocean floor. As they worked, they were not alone. The Soviet High Command was deeply curious about Howard Hughes' mysterious mining ship. A Soviet missile tracking ship, the Chazma, was diverted to the Glomar's location. It pulled up alongside, close enough for the crews to wave. Soon after, a Soviet tugboat, the SB-10, arrived and began to circle. The Soviets hailed the Glomar on the radio, asking in polite English what they were doing. The Glomar's captain, a CIA man playing the part of a civilian contractor, played dumb. "We're mining for manganese nodules," he'd radio back. "The work is very difficult." To maintain the cover, the CIA crew had to perform. They moved equipment around the deck, they faked drilling operations, they even held a barbecue on the stern, waving and offering beers to the Soviet sailors watching them through binoculars. Inside, the crew was forbidden from speaking English in any common area in case the Soviets had planted listening devices on the hull. They spoke a fake, made-up language they called glow-glow. All the while, just a few hundred feet away in the hidden moon pool, the 3-mile-long pipe string was still descending, inch by inch, into the blackness. The Soviets, utterly bored by the sight of a failed mining operation, eventually grew tired. They sent a message to the Glomar offering assistance, which was politely declined. After a few more days, the Soviet ships, convinced this was just another crazy capitalist boondoggle, sailed away. The crew on the Glomar breathed a collective sigh of relief. The trap was set. After 8 days, the Claw finally reached the seabed. Guided by sonar and deep-sea cameras, the operators in the control room, 3 miles above, began the most delicate maneuver ever attempted. They were playing a real-life billion-dollar claw game. They hovered Clementine over the broken hull of the K-129. The images relayed to the surface were grainy, ethereal. The wreck was a ghost. Gently, they lowered the mechanism. The Talon slid into the mud on either side of the hull. The order was given: close claws. Hydraulic motors whined and the massive steel fingers closed, digging into the silt and cradling the 2,000-ton submarine. Sensors confirmed they had a positive grip. The impossible had been achieved. They had it. The order was given to raise the string. The massive derrick on the Glomar began to pull, reversing the process, 60 feet at a time. The strain on the motors was immense. For days they lifted. The K-129, a prize of unimaginable value, was being drawn up from its grave. And then, disaster. They were about halfway up. More than a mile of pipe was still below them. Suddenly, a series of alarms shrieked through the control room. The load sensors on the pipe string went haywire. A sonar operator watched in horror as a massive dark cloud began to blossom on his screen, obscuring the target. The Claw had broken. Under the immense, unanticipated stress, several of Clementine's massive talons had fractured. The K-129, already fragile from its implosion and years underwater, could not be held. The main body of the submarine, the conning tower with its code room, the missile silos, the engine compartment, cracked, broke apart, and began its long 3-mile fall back to the bottom of the ocean. The control room was silent. Years of work, billions of dollars, all gone in an instant. But not all was lost. When the operators checked their sensors, they realized something was still in the Claw, a smaller piece. The front 38-foot section of the submarine, the bow, had remained. It was a devastating failure, but it was not a total one. They continued the lift. Days later, a mangled, dripping piece of the K-129's bow was raised into the Glomar's moon pool, hidden at last from the world. It was a fraction of what they had hoped for. Inside this forward section, the recovery team found the bodies of 6 Soviet sailors. They were given a solemn, respectful examination. The team also recovered 2 Soviet nuclear-tipped torpedoes. But the grand prize, the code books, the missiles, the sonar, was gone. Returned to the abyss, this time forever. The Glomar Explorer sailed back to Long Beach. Its mission, a closely guarded, partial success. The recovered bow section was analyzed in secret. The 2 nuclear torpedoes provided invaluable data. And perhaps most importantly, the 6 recovered Soviet bodies were treated with honor. In a now declassified film taken by the CIA crew, you can see one of the most surreal moments of the Cold War. In the middle of the Pacific, American CIA agents stand at attention on the deck of a spy ship. A naval chaplain reads prayers in both English and Russian. An honor guard fires a salute, and the bodies of the 6 Soviet sailors, draped in a Soviet flag, are committed back to the deep. It was a moment of shared humanity in the midst of a silent, brutal war. As far as the CIA was concerned, the secret was safe. The Soviets never knew what happened. They believed the Glomar project was a commercial failure. Project Azorian was quietly shelved. The secret would have died there were it not for a completely unrelated crime, a simple burglary. In June 1974, just as the Glomar was arriving on station, a group of thieves broke into the Los Angeles offices of the Summa Corporation, Howard Hughes' own company. They weren't looking for government secrets, they were looking for cash. But among the items they stole was a locked filing cabinet. Inside, they found a memo, a single piece of paper that detailed a secret CIA contract with Hughes' company for a ship called the Glomar Explorer and its mission to raise a sunken Soviet submarine. The thieves, realizing they had something explosive, tried to sell it. The Los Angeles Times got wind of the story. Reporter Jack Nelson began digging. He started connecting the dots, the mysterious ship, the secretive Hughes, the rumors of a sunken sub. The CIA panicked. This was not a leak, it was a hemorrhage. The director of the CIA, William Colby, personally called the editors of the Los Angeles Times, the New York Times, and the Washington Post. He pleaded with them, invoking national security. He argued that if the story ran, the Soviets would learn how their sub was found, compromising the entire SOSUS network. More importantly, it would destroy the delicate diplomatic relationship with the Soviet Union known as détente. The newspapers, in a rare act of patriotic self-censorship, agreed to sit on the story. The secret held for a few more months. But the story was too big. In February 1975, the Los Angeles Times could wait no longer. They published the story, blowing the lid off Project Azorian. The world was stunned. The scale, the audacity, the sheer science fiction nature of it was overwhelming. When reporters swarmed the CIA for confirmation, the agency was backed into a corner. They couldn't lie, but they couldn't tell the truth. So they created a response that has since become legendary. CIA spokesman Angus Thurmer, when asked about the Glomar Explorer, uttered the immortal phrase, "We can neither confirm nor deny the existence of the information you request." It was the first time the Glomar response was ever used, a perfect bureaucratic shield that has become a permanent part of the intelligence world's vocabulary. Project Azorian was over. It was simultaneously one of the greatest intelligence failures and one of the most stunning technological achievements of the 20th century. It was a failure because it didn't get the prize. The code books and missiles were lost. It was a success because it proved the impossible was possible. It proved that a nation with enough will, secrecy, and resources could reach 3 miles into the abyss and pluck a secret from the seafloor. The Glomar Explorer itself, a $3.8 billion marvel of engineering, was eventually mothballed, a relic of a war fought in shadows. It was later sold for scrap and then refitted, ironically, as a real deep-sea drilling vessel, living out its days doing the very job it was built to fake. Project Azorian remains a monument to a different era, an era of limitless budgets and paranoid secrecy, of staggering technological ambition, and of a silent, invisible war waged in the deepest, darkest corners of our world. It was a heist so bold it had to be hidden in plain sight, a secret so massive it could only be kept by the ocean itself. But now we have to ask the question, was Project Azorian a failure or a success? They spent $3.8 billion and only recovered the bow, but they proved the impossible could be done and retrieved 2 nuclear torpedoes. What do you think? Was this the greatest intelligence failure in history or its most stunning technological achievement? Let us know your verdict in the comments below.